Hello, friends. We want to know from which cities you listen to us. Like and write in the comments where you are from. And also share what shocking stories happened in your city or even to you. Subscribe because the next story may be about your city or your personal drama. And now a new exciting story. Michael woke up a little before the alarm went off. The morning sun barely filtered through the thick curtains of the bedroom. He lay there for a few seconds, looking at the white ceiling and listening to the even breathing of Sarah sleeping next to him. Another day was starting normally and calmly, at least outwardly. Every morning, he and Sarah had a routine they had honed over decades. Michael slipped out of bed, careful not to wake his wife. He pulled on a t-shirt and sweatpants and walked quietly into the hallway. In the next room, judging by the silence, their son, 16-year-old Jake, was still asleep. Michael walked downstairs, past the photographs on the walls their family was captured in countless pictures. Michael and Sarah on their wedding day, their young faces beaming with happiness, holding newborn Jake, a family vacation at the seaside, everyone smiling against the backdrop of the ocean surf. These pictures always warmed Michael's soul. He was proud of what he had achieved. A strong family, a cozy home in a quiet suburb, a stable job. Everything he had ever dreamed of seemed to have come true. In the kitchen, Michael put coffee on to brew. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the room. While the coffee was brewing, he quickly checked his phone, a few new work emails, a few news alerts. Nothing urgent. He put the phone down and pulled out some bread from the bread bin to make toast for himself, Sarah, and Jake. Breakfast was always something of a quiet family ritual in their house. Even if everyone was rushing in the morning, a few minutes around the table set the right tone for the day. Soon light footsteps were heard. It was Sarah coming down, wrapped in a thin robe. Her light hair was tousled from sleep. Her face still had a sleepy softness. She fastened the belt of her robe and smiled at Michael, although the smile seemed a little tired to him. "Good morning," he greeted, handing her a mug of coffee. "Morning," Sarah said quietly, accepting the mug and rubbing her eyes delicately. She took a sip of coffee and leaned against the counter. "Thank you." Michael nodded and went back to toasting. He watched Sarah out of the corner of his eye. She seemed lost in thought, her eyes unfocused. He had noticed this state of mind in her more and more often in recent months, thoughtful, distant. In the past few mornings, she would chatter cheerfully about her plans for the day, remember what she needed to buy at the store, or ask what he was doing after work. Now, there was a quiet awkwardness between them. "How did you sleep?" he asked, wanting to break the silence. "Fine," she replied, distracted from her thoughts and looking at him. "And you?" "That's okay, too," Michael smiled, trying to sound cheerful. He took out the hot toast and put it on a plate. "It looks like it's going to be a hot day today." Sarah nodded automatically, looking away again. Michael felt a little disappointed. He remembered the times when they could chat for hours about everything under the sun. Of course, over the years the passion wanes, the conversations become more mundane about bills, their son's schedule, plans for the weekend. But even these familiar conversations began to fade. He missed the old closeness, but he attributed it to ordinary fatigue and routine. Sarah began to work more, taking on extra shifts at her company, often staying late. Michael was also busy at work. He was a project manager at a software company, and for the past few months they had been in a rush before the launch of a new product. They both came home tired. As they drank their coffee in silence, Jake walked into the kitchen, yawning. A tall teenager with tousled brown hair, he dropped his backpack on the floor by the door and plopped down on a chair. "Morning," he muttered, still waking up. "Good morning, sleepyhead." Michael smiled at his son and pushed a plate of toast towards him. "Come on, have some breakfast before school." Sarah also tried to smile at her son. "Hi, darling. How did you sleep?" "Fine," Jake shrugged, already biting into his toast. He pulled out his phone and started browsing through something, chewing half-heartedly. "Put the phone away," Michael said automatically, not in a strict but firm tone. "Eat first, the news can wait." Jake reluctantly placed the smartphone face down. "Okay." There was a silence, broken only by the clink of cups and plates. Michael glanced sideways at his wife and son. There they were, his family, the most precious thing he had. He should be glad that they were there, that everything was okay. But deep down, anxiety was brewing. Something has changed subtly lately. Sarah had become distant. Jake was spending more and more time in his room or with friends, immersed in teenage interests. And Michael himself felt tired and lost in the hustle and bustle of the days. He loved his wife, he loved his son, but it was as if an invisible wall had begun to grow between them. He didn't want to be dramatic. After all, everyone had their cool-off periods. The main thing was to keep in touch. I'll have to drag Sarah out on a date somewhere, he thought. With work and worries, they had stopped spending time with just the two of them. Maybe they could go to a restaurant or a movie in the evening, just as a couple, not as parents and housemates. The thought cheered him up a little. Yes, he had to do something before this quiet detachment became a habit. By the way, Michael began, getting Sarah's attention. I was thinking, maybe we could go out for an evening this week, just the two of us. Sarah raised her eyebrows, as if the offer had caught her off guard. Huh? This week? Yet he tried to keep his tone light. Like Friday, Jake has practice until late anyway. We could ask your sister to babysit him if needed. Let's go to that new Italian restaurant downtown. How about that? Sarah looked away, her fingers tightening around her mug. Friday, I don't know, Mike. We have a report coming up at work. I might be late. Friday evening. Disappointment sounded involuntarily in his voice, and he immediately tried to soften his tone. Saturday is also possible, or another day when it is convenient for you. Sarah shook her head. Let's see how it goes, okay? I'm just not sure about the schedule right now. Okay, Michael said quietly, pretending not to be particularly hurt by the rejection. He didn't want to push. If she was overwhelmed, now might not be the best time. But it left a bad taste in her mouth. Jake, who hadn't been paying much attention to his parents' conversation, devoured his breakfast and stood up from the table. I'll go, the bus leaves in 10 minutes. Of course, Michael nodded. Have a good day at school. Yeah, Jake muttered, already putting on his sneakers at the exit. Sarah walked up to her son, straightened the collar of his t-shirt, and kissed him on the cheek. Bye, darling. Behave yourself. Mom, everything's fine. The teenager pulled away, embarrassed. Bye. Jake ran out the door. Through the kitchen window, Michael and Sarah watched their son skip across the lawn to the school bus stop. The kitchen fell silent as he disappeared. I have to get ready too, Sarah said quietly, placing her empty mug in the sink. Of course, Michael tried to smile. Do you have a lot to do today? The usual, Sarah shrugged, avoiding his gaze. I'll probably be back late. We have a client meeting later this evening. I see. You came after 10 yesterday too, he noted as calmly as possible. Is everything okay at work? You've been very busy lately. Sarah froze for a second, then answered in a casual tone. Yeah, it's fine. It's just a complicated project, you know. Yeah, Michael looked away, staring at the remains of his coffee. Maybe don't work so hard. You look tired. Thank you for your concern, but everything is under control, Sarah replied dryly. She left the kitchen, leaving Michael alone with his heavy thoughts. He heard her upstairs getting ready, opening and closing cabinets, turning on the shower. Michael cleared the dishes from the table, trying to push the obsession away. But the uneasiness was growing. Something was definitely wrong. It wasn't the first time she'd come home late, citing work. Sometimes he'd wake up in the night and find her gone. Sarah would say she'd gone down for a drink of water or couldn't sleep and was reading a book in the living room. She'd become more withdrawn. Was she stressed or had problems she wasn't talking about? Did she not trust him enough to share? A recent incident came to mind. A couple of weeks ago, he had noticed Sarah talking on the phone in a hushed voice. When he entered the room, she quickly ended the conversation and put the phone down, saying it was a colleague calling about a report. Michael hadn't thought anything of it at the time, but now, recalling it, he felt a vague uneasiness. Was she hiding something? He took a deep breath, berating himself for even thinking that way. Sarah was his wife, his partner, his friend for nearly 18 years. They had always been honest with each other, hadn't they? He was distracted by the sound of her coming downstairs, ready to go out. Sarah looked impeccable, as always, when she went to work. A strict skirt, an elegant blouse, light makeup, her hair styled. Only a careful look could notice the dark circles from lack of sleep under her eyes, and some nervousness in her whole appearance. "Well, I'm going," she said, avoiding looking him straight in the eye. "I'll see you this evening." Michael came over to give her a goodbye kiss, but Sarah had already turned to the door, and his kiss only slid across her cheek. She didn't kiss him back, as she usually did. He thought it odd, but said nothing. "Have a good day," was all he said after her. The door closed. The house became quiet. Michael stood in the middle of the kitchen, feeling an inexplicable anxiety. An unpleasant chill settled in his chest. He did not want to allow bad thoughts, but he could not help himself. Something was happening to his family, and he did not know how to react to it. Looking again at the photograph on the wall, where he and Sarah, as young men, looked at each other with endless love, Michael sighed softly. He wanted to bring back that feeling of closeness and trust, and he decided, tonight, no matter what, he would have a serious talk with his wife, ask if everything was okay with her. Maybe he really was missing something. He had to figure it out before the small cracks turned into an abyss. With this thought, he finished his cold coffee, took his car keys, and headed to work, trying to shake off his gloomy premonitions. The day at work dragged on painfully long. Michael tried to focus on the tasks at hand, rechecking estimates, answering emails, calling the development team. But his thoughts kept returning to his morning conversation with his wife. More specifically, to his pathetic attempt to ask her out on a date and the way she evaded him. "Am I really so inattentive that I missed something important?" he thought, mechanically clicking his pen at his desk. A colleague in the office, noticing his absent-mindedness, even asked if everything was okay. Michael waved it off. He was just thinking about the project. Closer to lunch, he couldn't stand it any longer and called Sarah. The phone buzzed for a long time, but she didn't pick up. Finally, just before the answering machine went off, he heard her voice. "Hi, Mike. Is something wrong?" "No, I'm fine," he answered quickly, slightly surprised by her tone. She seemed to be speaking in a whisper. It was quiet around her, as if she had left her workstation. "I just wanted to see how you were. You seemed kind of different this morning." "I'm fine," Sarah replied evenly. "Very busy, to be honest. We're getting ready for the meeting I told you about." "I see. I see." Michael stopped short, not knowing how to get to the main point. Finally, he decided, "Listen, maybe we should talk tonight. It seems to me that we haven't discussed anything in person for a long time. Maybe we should open a bottle of wine and just chat." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Sarah replied in the same tensely polite voice. "To be honest, I'll probably be completely exhausted after the meeting. Let's put it off until the weekend, okay? I don't think I'll be in the mood today." Michael's heart sank uncomfortably. "Okay, whatever you say. But if you come back early, let me know. I miss you, you know." He was surprised by his own frankness. They rarely said such things to each other lately. But he wanted her to know that he felt the distance and was trying to close it. "Okay, I'll try," was all Sarah answered expressionlessly. "Okay, I have to go. The planning meeting has started. Until this evening." "See you in the evening," Michael echoed, but he could already hear the all-clear beeps. He lowered the phone and ran his hand over his face. A feeling of helplessness washed over him. It seemed that the conversation had only made him more anxious. Sarah was like a stranger, formal, distant. She hadn't even asked how he was doing, hadn't said a single warm word, not a single spark of intimacy during the entire conversation. For the rest of the day, Michael continued to struggle with dark thoughts. Various options swirled in his head. Maybe Sarah was just going through a difficult period related to work or hormones, or the reason was much more serious. Time after time, he pushed away the suspicion that he was afraid to formulate even to himself. Could she really be having an affair? The thought made him feel sick. No, it was too absurd. Sarah was not that kind of woman. In 18 years of marriage, she had never given him any reason to doubt her fidelity. They had always had a strong trust. But why this coldness, this secrecy? Maybe she was offended by him for something. But what could he have done? As the workday drew to a close, Michael realized he couldn't just drive home as if nothing had happened. There was a desperate fear brewing inside him, and he needed to talk to someone before he went crazy with guesswork. He dialed his best friend, Tom. Tom Jenkins was an old friend of his, dating back to their college days. They had once played on the college football team together and had maintained a friendship through the years. Tom had known Sarah for almost as long and had been a guest at their wedding. If anyone could bare their soul to anyone, it was him. "Hey, Mike, hey." Tom's voice was as cheerful as ever. "How's life?" "Hello, Tom." Michael tried to give his voice a normal intonation, but apparently he didn't succeed very well. His friend immediately became wary. "Did something happen? You seem kind of unwell." Michael thought for a second. Was it wise to discuss suspicions about his own wife? But finally he blurted out, "Listen, can I come over? I need to talk. It's personal." Tom instantly became serious. "Of course, come. I'm home now and took a day off. Stop by when you can, I'll be there." "Thank you, I'll be there in half an hour." Michael nodded and hung up. He felt a little better just thinking that he wasn't alone, that there was someone he could share with without fear of judgment. Tom lived a few blocks from Michael's office, and 20 minutes later Michael was already parking at his friend's house. They settled in the backyard, on the terrace overlooking the neat garden. Tom immediately, without asking unnecessary questions, thrust a bottle of beer into Michael's hand. "Well, spill it, buddy." I was starting to think something was wrong. Michael took a couple of sips of cold beer, collecting his thoughts. Tom waited patiently. Finally, Michael spoke, hesitantly at first, then faster, pouring out the tight lump of doubt that had been building up in his soul. He told her how Sarah had become distant from him in recent months, how she often stayed late at work, how she was not herself. He admitted that he was beginning to suspect the worst, although he was afraid to even say it. Tom listened attentively, without interrupting. Only when Michael fell silent, fearfully awaiting a reaction, did his friend frown. "Do you think she's cheating on you?" he asked bluntly, cutting through the curtain of euphemisms like a scalpel. Hearing out loud what he himself was afraid to voice, Michael winced painfully. I don't know, Tom. Honestly, it sounds crazy, but I don't understand anything anymore. It feels like I'm losing her." Tom put the bottle down. "Listen, brother, let's take it in order. Have you noticed any obvious signs? Maybe correspondence, strange calls, the smell of someone else's perfume?" There were calls. I caught her speaking quietly once, and she stopped right away. "I don't know about the perfume. Sometimes she smells of an unfamiliar perfume, but she herself is a new eau de toilette. I'm not sure. I didn't see any correspondence. I didn't check her phone behind her back." Michael tiredly ran his hand over his face. "She just behaves differently. We used to be like a team, but now it feels like she's somewhere far away and I'm bothering her." Tom shook his head. "Maybe she's depressed or something hormonal. Women sometimes get mood swings like that, especially when they're in their 40s. Tom was silent for a moment, looking intently at his friend. "Do you love her?" "Of course I do," Michael flared up. "She's my wife, the mother of my son. I can't live without her." "Then you need to have a straight talk with her," Tom said firmly. "No hints or omissions. Sit down and say, 'I'm worried about this and that.' Are you hiding something? If so, you'd better admit it now. You've always been honest with each other." "I tried," Michael sighed. "I called her today, asked her to talk this evening. She moved out, said she was tired." "Well, tired or not, but the conversation is necessary. Otherwise, you'll wind yourself up with uncertainty. It's better to know the truth, even if it's unpleasant, than to suffer from guesswork. Michael nodded silently. Tom, seeing his state, put his hand on his shoulder. Hang in there, brother. Maybe it's not that bad. Maybe it really is something else. But if she really did slip up, what are you going to do? I don't know, Michael whispered. He really didn't want to imagine what would happen if his worst fears were confirmed. I just hope this is a mistake, a misunderstanding. They sat for a while longer, changing the topic to something neutral. Tom was telling the latest office stories, clearly trying to distract his friend. But Michael was barely listening. His mind had already decided. Today he would find out everything. No matter how painful it was, he had to know the truth. The sun was setting when Michael got home. There was no other car in the deserted driveway, which meant Sarah wasn't there yet. Jake was sitting in the living room in front of the TV, flipping through channels with a vacant look. "Hey, Dad," he muttered, without even looking up from the screen. "Hey, buddy." Michael sat down on the couch next to his son. "How was your day?" "It's fine," Jake shrugged. He looked bored. "We finished practice early today. I thought my mom would give me a ride, but she wasn't here, so I had to take the bus." "Mom's late," Michael answered evenly, trying to hide the bitterness in his voice. "She's in a rush at work." The guy didn't answer and clicked on another channel. "Listen, maybe we should order pizza," Michael suggested. "It looks like we'll be having dinner alone." "Cool." Jake perked up a little and even looked up from the TV. "Can I have it with double cheese?" "Whatever you want." Michael smiled at him tensely. He felt lousy inside, but he tried not to show it, especially in front of his son. 40 minutes later, a box of hot pizza was steaming on the coffee table. They were eating right in the living room, rewatching an old sci-fi action movie, one of Jake's favorites, which he and Michael had watched together for the 10th time. Usually, at such moments, Michael felt at peace. A quiet evening at home, his beloved son nearby, a delicious dinner. But now his heart was not in the right place. As the clock hand approached 9, Jake, having finished his third piece, announced that he was going to his room, either to finish his homework or to surf the internet. Michael patted his son on the head. "Come on, and don't go to bed late." Alone in the empty living room, he removed the pizza box from the table and threw it in the trash. He flipped through the channels mindlessly, watching nothing, just waiting. At one point, he found himself listening to every sound outside: the hum of her car engine, the slam of her door, signaling her return. Sarah arrived at almost 10 o'clock. Michael immediately heard the hinges of the front door creak. He turned off the TV and went up to greet his wife. Sarah walked in, holding a laptop and a folder. She was still wearing her office attire, except that she had pulled her hair up to cover her neck. She looked tired, but there was a wariness in her eyes. "Hello," she said quietly, closing the door behind her. "Hello," Michael replied, trying to keep his voice calm. He noticed how she jumped when she saw him waiting for her in the hallway, as if she hadn't expected him to be there. "You're not asleep yet," she began, avoiding his gaze. "I was waiting for you," he said directly. "We wanted to talk." Sarah rubbed the bridge of her nose tiredly. "Mike, now is not the time, really. I'm very tired. I've been on my feet all day. Let's do it tomorrow, please." Her voice was tinged with irritation, mixed with pleading. Michael clenched his fists, trying to control himself. He had promised himself not to make a scene, but he could no longer back down. "Sarah, I don't think we can put this off any longer," he said firmly. "I feel like something is going on between us. You're always by yourself. You're rarely home. You hardly talk to me. I want to understand what's going on. Please." For a moment, he thought he saw fear flash in his wife's eyes, but she quickly looked away and walked past him into the living room, throwing her bag and folder on the chair. "Don't make things up," she said over her shoulder. "It's business as usual. Just a lot of work. We talked about it." "No, not like usual," Michael said quietly but stubbornly, following her. "You didn't come in every night at 10 before. You weren't so distant." Maybe it's not just about work. Are you having some kind of problem? Sarah took a defensive stance, crossing her arms over her chest and looking away. No problems other than work, Mike. Sorry for devoting so much time to it, but that's life. You're busy too. I don't blame you. I'm not reproaching you. I'm worried. He took a step towards her, trying to look into her eyes. Maybe something's wrong with your health, or... He didn't dare voice his obvious suspicion, but he didn't need to. Sarah had already flared up with unexpected irritation. I'm fine. No need to interrogate me every minute. I just want to be alone right now, okay? Michael froze, taken aback by the harshness of the tone. Sarah, exhaling heavily, headed for the stairs to the second floor. Sarah, he called out quietly. She turned around for a few seconds. Her eyes showed weariness mixed with some kind of torment, but she said nothing. Slowly, she went upstairs and disappeared into the bedroom. Michael sank down on the sofa, trying to calm down. The conversation had failed again. He felt even more helpless. Maybe Tom was right, and he was winding himself up for nothing. But then why did she get so angry when he asked her a question? Any other reaction would have been more comforting. She could have laughed, like, "Why are you so stupid?" or calmed him down gently. But she chose defense, even attack. Half an hour later, Michael came upstairs. The bedroom was dimly lit. Sarah was standing in front of the dressing table, her back to the door. She was wearing a robe, her hair loose. She was writing something on her phone, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. Michael tapped his knuckles softly on the doorframe, announcing his presence. "Hey, can I come in?" Sarah shuddered and almost dropped the phone. She quickly hid it behind her back, then came to her senses and put it in her robe pocket. She turned to her husband. Yes, of course. I thought you had already gone to bed. I wanted to take a shower before bed." He nodded toward the bathroom, which was in the bedroom. "And wish you good night." "Oh, I see," Sarah smiled tightly. "Good night, Mike." He came closer and gently touched her shoulder. Sorry for the pressure. I'm just worried." The wife lowered her eyes. "Everything is fine. Sorry I lost my temper. I've become somewhat nervous." Michael gave her a tiny hug. To his relief, she didn't pull away, but she didn't return the gesture either. He caught a whiff of someone else's cologne mixed with her perfume. His heart skipped a beat. The scent was too obviously male. Was it his imagination? Without showing it, he stepped back. "Then see you tomorrow." Sarah nodded. Michael turned to go to the bathroom when her phone vibrated softly from her robe pocket. Sarah tensed, her hand instinctively going to her pocket. They froze for a moment. "Your phone," Michael said quietly. "I know," she answered quickly, taking a step back. "It's nothing important." "They're writing at night. What if it's something urgent?" he said insistently, and before she could react, he gently extended his hand. "Let me have a look. What if it's from work?" Sarah clutched the phone to her, her eyes widening. "No, don't. It's personal." Michael's inside sank. Her reaction spoke louder than any words. Never before had she hidden her phone from him like this in a panic. "Personal," he echoed, feeling his voice break. "Personal from the husband you lived with for so many years?" Sarah came to her senses and shook her head. "Stop it, Mike. It was my friend who wrote this. She's having problems. It has nothing to do with us, okay? I'm sorry, but I don't want to reveal other people's secrets." The excuse sounded unconvincing. Michael looked at her face, trying to read at least something truthful. Sarah held his gaze for only a couple of seconds, then turned away. "Let's not fight anymore today, please. I'm tired as it is. Go to bed." Without waiting for an answer, she quickly left the bedroom. A second later, the door to the next room slammed. It seemed she had gone to the guest room or the bathroom. Michael sat down on the edge of the bed. His hands were shaking. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest and the blood rushing in his ears. It was as if an abyss had just opened up before him. The phone. Damn it, the phone. Up until this moment, He had tried to convince himself that he was just overthinking it. But now, her reaction, her fear, the lie about her friend, it was all so obvious. He took a deep breath with difficulty. There was still no proof, but his heart already knew the terrible truth. Sarah was hiding something, and it looked like it was something terrible. Michael remembered the smell of someone else's cologne, barely perceptible, but clearly not his own and not simply imagined. All the oddities of the last few weeks came back to him. Late work, mysterious calls, a reluctance to be intimate. The puzzle began to come together into a disgusting picture. She has someone else, the icy thought flashed through his head. His chest tightened so much that it became difficult to breathe. In 18 years of marriage, Michael had never felt such pain. Even without knowing all the facts, it was as if he had already experienced betrayal. He wanted to rush in after her, demand to see her phone, shout it all out loud. But he didn't. Instead, Michael slowly stood up, walked to the light switch, and turned off the light. He stood in the middle of the bedroom in complete darkness, trying to calm down and collect his thoughts. If his worst fears are true, what now? Is everything he has spent years building up finally over? And why? For what? There were no answers. But he knew one thing for sure. He had to get to the truth, no matter how bitter it might be. Michael lay down in bed, still dressed, and stared at the ceiling. He couldn't sleep. Somewhere beyond the wall, perhaps in the living room, a dim light shone. Apparently Sarah hadn't returned to the bedroom. She probably couldn't sleep either, but she didn't want to be near him. That night, for the first time, Michael clearly realized that the trouble he was so afraid to let into his life was already on the doorstep. Michael woke up after a restless night with a firm resolve. Today, he would find out the truth. His body ached from tension and lack of sleep, but worst of all was the heaviness in his soul. Sarah was not in the bed next to him. She seemed to have fallen asleep in the guest room. The house was silent. He took a quick shower, trying to gather his courage. The reflection in the mirror showed a haggard man, his eyes red with fatigue. Nothing has been proven yet, he reminded himself. We must act with cold blood. When Michael came into the kitchen, Sarah was already busy making coffee. She met him with a wary look. "Good morning." "Hello," he answered quietly. The sight of his wife, as if an icy wall had grown between them, made his heart clench. "How did you sleep?" "It's fine," she turned away, busy with the coffee maker. Michael wanted to add something, but at that moment Jake ran into the kitchen. The teenager, not noticing the tension between his parents, grabbed an apple from the bowl and greeted them on the go. "Yo, good morning." "Aren't you going to have breakfast?" Sarah asked, trying to sound normal. "No time, I'm meeting the guys before school," the son answered, already heading for the exit. "Bye." She and Michael had only had time to exchange a glance before the front door slammed and Jake was gone. Sarah sighed and poured herself a cup of coffee. Michael realized that they were alone, and this was a chance to talk calmly. But what could he say? Accuse her without evidence? Or try to pry the truth out again? Sarah was the first to break the silence, but her words stunned Michael. "I'm sorry about yesterday," she said quietly, looking down at her mug. "I really lost my temper." Michael didn't have an answer right away. He wanted to shout, "What exactly are you apologizing for? For the lies? For the secrets?" But he just nodded. "I'm also sorry for pressuring you," he said carefully. "I'm just worried about us. I think we've grown apart." "Yes, a little," she agreed with unexpected ease, surprising him. Sarah looked up at him, and for a moment Michael thought he saw deep regret in her eyes. "I think I need some space. I'm confused. It'll pass." Michael tried to catch the hidden meaning of these words. Space. Confused? What did it mean? But he did not ask directly. "Maybe we could go somewhere together for the weekend, change the scenery," he suggested hopefully. "The three of us, the whole family, or just the two of us. What do you think?" Sarah smiled sadly at the corners of her lips. "I don't know, Mike. Let's decide closer to the weekend." The answer was evasive, but at least it was without the previous aggression. Michael nodded, trying to look calm, although inside everything was screaming. Her apology and soft tone seemed like an attempt to make amends or prevent further questions. Maybe she decided to put on a good face so that he would stop suspecting. Suddenly, Sarah looked at her watch and gasped, "Oh, I have to run. I'm late." She quickly finished her coffee and put the mug in the sink. Michael noticed that she had decided to leave earlier than usual today. "Are you leaving early today?" he asked cautiously. "Yes, the meeting is scheduled for the morning," Sarah said briefly, already leaving the kitchen. "Don't wait for me early. We have a corporate meeting in the evening. I might be late." Michael's heart sank painfully. It would be delayed again. But he asked neutrally, "For how long approximately?" Sarah, who had reached the door, turned around for a second. "I don't know exactly. I'll try to be home by 9. "Okay? Have a nice day," he muttered. She just nodded and disappeared into the hall. A minute later, Michael heard the sound of the front door slamming and the distant roar of a motor. He stood in the middle of the kitchen, clutching his coffee mug. The plan had finally formed in his head. Tonight by 9, he had to be where Sarah would be. If she was lying, if there was no meeting, he would know it. Michael quickly pulled out his phone and texted his boss, asking for the afternoon off for family reasons. Then he rushed upstairs to the bedroom. On the top shelf of the closet was a digital SLR camera. Michael was a keen photographer and sometimes took pictures of family celebrations. He charged the battery, checked that the memory card was in place. If he managed to catch something, it would be better to have proof. He hated the idea of having to play detective for his own wife, but he couldn't torment himself with uncertainty any longer. He somehow sat in the office until lunch, sorting out urgent matters. His head was seething with assumptions. What if he was wrong? What if there really was a meeting? But then, why didn't she let him look at the phone? Why such a smell, such secrets? No, too many oddities. At 2:30 in the afternoon, citing poor health, Michael left the office. He knew there were still a few hours until evening, but he wanted to get ready. He stopped at home to change. Instead of an office suit, he put on jeans, a dark t-shirt, and a jacket. This way, it would be easier to get lost in the crowd without attracting attention. He grabbed his camera and put it on the seat next to him. Around 4 o'clock, he was already close to the building where Sarah worked. Her company was located in a modern 10-story office building in the city's business district. Michael parked his car on a nearby street from where he could see the main entrance. His heart was pounding somewhere in his throat. He felt like he was in a cheap spy movie, sitting in his car and watching people enter and leave the building. Time dragged on painfully slowly. By 5 o'clock, the flow of office workers had increased. Many were finishing their working day. Michael became wary, peering at every female figure flashing by the entrance. Finally, about 15 minutes past 5, he saw Sarah. The wife did not come out alone. A tall, dark-haired man in a gray suit walked beside her. Sarah was talking animatedly to him, looking into his face and smiling as she had not smiled in front of Michael for a long time. The man leaned closer and said something back, also smiling. They seemed absorbed in each other. The blood rushed to Michael's face. He grabbed the camera convulsively, pointing the lens at the exit. His heart was pounding so hard it seemed to be audible even through the closed windows of the car. There they were, together, close. Happy? He clicked the shutter, zooming in. He took a few shots. Sarah and the guy standing close, their faces too pleased to be ordinary colleagues. Michael didn't know who it was, but he knew in his gut that it was probably that someone. A minute later, the couple moved toward the parking lot. Michael crouched low, watching as inconspicuous as possible. The man touched Sarah's back gallantly, guiding her toward the row of cars. Anger boiled in Michael's chest. He watched as the stranger opened the door of a black sedan, letting Sarah into the passenger seat. Then the man walked around the car and got behind the wheel. The engine started. Michael realized it was now or never. He started his car and, keeping his distance, followed them. Following someone is not an easy task, especially trying to remain unnoticed. But Michael concentrated with all his might. Fortunately, the evening traffic was dense, and his gray car was lost in the general flow. The black sedan wasn't headed home or anywhere they knew. It pulled onto the highway and headed out of town. Michael stayed a few cars back, trying not to lose sight of the distinctive bulk ahead. He wondered where they were going. The worst possible ideas were racing through his head. About half an hour into the drive, with the city blocks behind them, the black sedan turned onto an exit that led to a row of motels and roadside hotels popular with travelers and lovers, Michael thought with disgust. He slowed down and saw Sarah's car pull up in front of one of the motels, a small two-story building with a sign that said Highway Inn. Michael's heart was pounding. He pulled into the lot, keeping a safe distance but still able to watch. Sarah and the stranger got out of the car. The man looked around and put his arm around her waist. Michael could see this intimate gesture even from a distance. He automatically grabbed the camera and took a photo. The next moment, the stranger leaned over and kissed Sarah. She didn't pull away, on the contrary, she responded to the kiss. Michael felt the ground slipping away from under his feet. His temples began to pound, and his vision went dark. The photo he took at that moment came out blurry, his hands were shaking too much. But he didn't care about the photo anymore. All doubts were gone. Here she was, the truth, right before his eyes. For a couple of seconds he couldn't move, as if paralyzed. The sight of his wife in the arms of another man pierced his soul with a red-hot knife. Meanwhile, Sarah and her lover had separated and exchanged a few words. The man took a key card out of his pocket, and the two of them headed toward the entrance to the motel. Apparently, the room had been booked in advance. Sarah walked next to him, holding his arm. This gesture finally shook Michael out of his stupor. He jumped out of the car, not remembering himself. "Sarah!" he shouted at the top of his lungs. The figures at the motel door froze. Sarah turned at the sound of her own name, her expression horrified as she saw her husband running toward her. The man next to her also gaped in shock. Michael was already a few steps away. The pent-up rage burst forth. He did not remember himself, he only vaguely saw the stranger step forward, raising his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "Wait, let's calm down," he began, but Michael burst out, "Bastard!" he roared and gave vent to the emotions that had accumulated over the past few days. Sarah screamed. "Michael, oh God, don't!" She rushed forward, grabbing her husband's hand, trying to pull him away. But Michael was almost out of control. So much pain, resentment, anger was swirling inside him that he could barely restrain himself from attacking his defeated rival again. "This is your overtime, right?" he shouted in Sarah's face. His voice broke into a hysterical wheeze. "This is why you lied to me." "Please, calm down," she sobbed, still clinging to his hand. "I'll explain everything, just not here, please." The stranger, having recovered, straightened up, and now also stood between Michael and Sarah. Anger appeared on the man's face. "Hey, take it easy. Don't you dare touch her. One more word and I'll kill you," Michael hissed, rushing at him again. The men grappled. The stranger tried to fight back, but Michael, driven by rage, threw him to the asphalt. A short struggle ensued. Sarah screamed, trying to separate them. "Stop it. Enough." Her voice trembled with panic. Finally, the stranger managed to wriggle free and crawled away, raising his hands. "Damn, man, cool down. We didn't do anything bad." "Nothing bad?" Michael roared. "You sleep with my wife, and you call it nothing bad?" The stranger winced in pain, rubbing his bruised chin. He was clearly an office worker, not used to fighting, 5 years younger than Michael. He was breathing heavily and cast a quick glance at Sarah. She was standing next to him, covering her face with her hands. "Listen," the man said hoarsely, "I understand you're angry, but let's not make a scene. Let's go somewhere else. We'll talk." "I'm not going to talk to you, you bastard," Michael spat, straightening up. Now that the first surge of rage had passed, he was shaking. There was a painful stabbing in his chest. He turned to his wife. Sarah stood there, pale, her cheeks wet with tears. Her lips were trembling. She tried to say something, but she couldn't. Why? Michael asked, his voice breaking. Just tell me why, Sarah. She sobbed. Mike, I'm so sorry. A pity? He repeated and chuckled nervously, feeling his eyes stinging treacherously too. You're sorry, after everything that. God. He ran his hands through his hair in frustration, taking in the scene. The three of them in a deserted motel parking lot, beginning to fade into the evening light. A few people at the other end of the lot were watching, hesitant to intervene. Humiliation washed over Michael. Who is he? He breathed, nodding at the man who had already risen to his feet and was standing silently a little further away. Your lover, huh? How long has this been going on? Sarah looked down, tears continuing to flow down her cheeks. A few months. Michael closed his eyes as if struck. Several months. While he suspected nothing, he couldn't even finish the thought. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't you dare ask for forgiveness now, he said tiredly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. That's enough. He turned and walked away toward his car. Sarah ran after him. Wait, don't leave like that. We need to talk. It's too late to talk. He stopped and looked at her with such pain that she recoiled. You said everything with your actions. Please, Mike, let's go home and talk about this calmly, please. Sarah begged. Michael looked over her shoulder at the silent figure of her lover, who remained where he was. Hatred flashed in his husband's eyes. Go home, he repeated bitterly. And he? Will you invite him too? No, of course not. Sarah shook her head, trying to take Michael's hands again. I'll go with you right now. I'll tell you everything, but for God's sake, let's get out of here. Michael was silent for several long seconds. Then he quietly pushed her hands away. Get in the car, he said in a muffled voice. Sarah nodded, wiped her tears with her sleeve, and hurried to the passenger side of his car. Michael turned to her lover and said through gritted teeth, And you stay away. If you come near my family again, I'll kill you. The man did not answer, but only lowered his eyes. Michael got behind the wheel. His hands were shaking, he had to squeeze them until his knuckles were white. Sarah got in next to him. He took one last look at the motel, at the man in the distance, and sucked in a breath. Then he started the engine and took off. The car shot out of the parking lot and back onto the highway. The silence in the car was deafening. Sarah was sobbing, but she didn't say anything else. Michael was looking straight ahead, trying to control his anger and hurt. Otherwise, he might veer off the road into a ditch somewhere. His life had just collapsed like a house of cards, and the shock was still numb. All he knew now was that there was no turning back. The drive home seemed endless to Michael. Sarah was still crying quietly, looking out the window. Michael was silent, gritting his teeth so as not to say anything unnecessary while he was sitting behind the wheel. The image of her kissing another man was still before his eyes. Her chest was so painfully squeezed that it seemed like there was not enough air. It was already dark when the car stopped at their house. Michael exhaled and turned off the engine. For a while, neither of them moved. Let's go, he finally said hoarsely, opening the door. Sarah nodded, sniffling, and got out of the car. They walked to the porch. Michael's hand shook as he inserted the key into the lock. Finally, the door gave way, and they stepped inside. The light was on in the living room. Jake was probably home. Sarah took a deep breath. Jake. She took a step toward the stairs leading to the second floor, but Michael grabbed her elbow. He suddenly wanted her to explain herself to him first, and not rush to her son for consolation. Wait, he said coldly. We first. Sarah cringed under his grip and whispered softly, Okay. He let go of her and walked into the living room. Jake was sitting in a chair with a textbook on his lap and headphones in his ears. When he saw his parents, he took off one earphone. Oh, hi. I thought you both were late today. He stopped short, noticing the state of his mother, her tear-stained face, her makeup smeared. Jake stood up, alarmed. Mom, what happened? Sarah ran her hands over her cheeks, but the tears had dried, leaving only red eyes. She tried to smile. It's okay, honey. It's just... Nothing good, Michael interrupted harshly. He didn't want to drag his son into this, but he couldn't control his bitterness anymore. Your mother has something she wants to tell us. Mike, please, Sarah protested quietly, casting a pleading look. Jake looked from his father to his mother and took out the second earpiece, feeling the tension growing. What's going on? Michael looked straight at his wife, waiting for an answer. Sarah lowered her head, avoiding meeting her son's eyes. Mom, Jake walked around the table and approached his parents. You were crying. Dad, why are you like this? Because, Michael smiled mirthlessly, your mother thinks you can live a double life and no one will know. What? I don't understand. Jake frowned. Sarah winced at these words. She held out her hands to her son. Jake, darling, let's talk later, okay? This is between adults. But Michael was already seething. No, why not? Let him know. Let him find out right away who is to blame for our family falling apart. Guilty? Jake echoed, his face suddenly going white. He looked at his father, then at his mother, as if putting together a puzzle. You're getting a divorce? Sarah's chest heaved, and she pressed her hand to her mouth. Michael looked her straight in the eye. Tell him what you did. Dad, stop, you're scaring me, Jake's voice trembled. The boy turned his gaze to his mother. Mom, what's the matter? What do you mean, a double life? Sarah opened her mouth, but the words stuck. Tears began to flow down her cheeks again. Michael couldn't stand the pause and blurted out, as if spitting out poison. Your mother was cheating on me, Jake. She's having an affair. The last words came with effort, as if to someone else. The room was dead silent. Jake started, unblinking, from his father to his mother. No, that's not true, he whispered, shaking his head. Mom. Jake. Sarah took a step toward her son, but he recoiled. Is it true? The boy's voice rose an octave. Tell me, Mom, you cheated on Dad? Sarah began to sob chokingly. Yes or no? Jake shouted suddenly, his face flushed with anger and pain. Yes, Sarah said barely audibly, covering her face with her hands. Yes, I made a terrible mistake. Without waiting for the rest, Jake turned and ran away. He literally ran up the stairs, stomping loudly. A second later, the door to his room slammed. Jake, Sarah called desperately, but there was silence in response. Michael felt a bitter satisfaction in seeing how the truth had hurt her, but at the same time his heart was breaking. He saw his son's pain and knew that he, too, was to blame for everything that had happened. Well, there you go, he said harshly. Now you've ruined not only our marriage, but also your relationship with your son. Sarah dropped her hands, looking at the closed door above. Don't say that. Please. How do you expect me to tell you? Michael snapped. His anger demanded an outlet. You made our lives a nightmare. Why, Sarah? What did you miss? We were a family, damn it. I didn't mean to, she said, crying. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. You didn't want to? He laughed bitterly. You lied to us for months and didn't want to hurt us? How is that possible? Sarah took a hesitant step toward him. Mike, I know there's no excuse, but believe me, I love you. You and Jake are the most important thing in my life. What happened? I don't even know how I got this far. Michael shook his head, backing away. Don't you dare say the word love right now. That's not how people love. Sarah sobbed, folding her hands as if in prayer. You have every right to be angry. I deserve every word you say. But please listen. I need to explain myself, even if it doesn't change anything. I have to. Michael stood with his fists clenched. Part of him wanted to scream at her to shut up. No amount of explanation would bring back what had been. But another part, oddly enough, wanted to understand. Why? Because the question burned inside him. Why had she done this? He nodded silently, looking at her from under his brows. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to get herself under control. She wiped her face with her palms, smearing the mascara under her eyes, and began in a shaky voice. I don't even know where to begin. I guess I've felt empty. The last couple of years, I felt like you and I were like neighbors, Mike. You were all about work, and I was too busy with my own stuff. We were barely alone together, and when we were together, you were like you were far away in my thoughts. Michael was about to object, but Sarah continued, hurrying to get it all out. I understand, it sounds pathetic. I should have talked to you, shouted about how bad I felt. But I was afraid. No, I wasn't afraid of you. I was afraid to admit to myself that our marriage had cracked. I thought that was how it should be. All families go through a cooling off. I convinced myself to be patient, to wait. But inside, resentment was building up. It seemed to me that you no longer saw me, didn't appreciate me. Her voice broke. Michael was silent, listening sullenly. Somewhere deep inside his soul, echoes of truth resonated. He really did work a lot. He was often tired. Their romance had faded. But was that a reason? Then he showed up, Sarah whispered, looking at the floor. His name is Richard. He came to our department last fall. At first, nothing special, just a colleague like any other. Then we started working together on a project, often staying late. He listened to me, joked, supported me. For the first time in a long time, I felt interested. Michael clenched his jaw until it hurt. Every word felt like a sting. It's not an excuse, I know, she added quickly, glancing at him. I'm just trying to explain. One night, after a successful deal, my colleagues and I were having drinks. Richard offered to give me a ride. I was so lonely, touched by his attention. He kissed me, and I didn't push him away. Sarah spoke more and more quietly, as if she were shrinking with shame. Michael covered his eyes with his hand. To imagine this picture was a knife in the heart. After that time, I swore to myself it was a mistake, she whispered. But we had both crossed the line. Then there were the messages, the secret meetings. I was tossing and turning. Part of me screamed at me to stop, to tell you everything. Another part greedily grabbed at this feeling of novelty, passion. I felt like I was young again, alive. A tear rolled down Michael's cheek, and he quickly wiped it away, not believing that he was still capable of crying in front of her. Sarah noticed, her voice trembling even more. I cannot be forgiven. I betrayed you. I betrayed our son. I couldn't even imagine how painful it would all be, how selfish I am. She burst into tears. Forgive me. Please, forgive me. Michael was silent for a long time. He looked at the woman he had loved for almost half his life and did not recognize her, or did not recognize himself. Her confession did not bring relief, except perhaps to answer the question, why? But that did not make it any easier, quite the opposite. Now he clearly saw how their family boat had been sinking all this time, while he naively believed that everything was fine. So it's my fault, huh? He said bitterly at last. I made you lonely and pushed you into the arms of another? Sarah shook her head. No, it's my choice. It's not your fault, Mike. I should have talked to you, fought, not cheated. I was weak, and I'll pay for it. She suddenly fell to her knees right in front of him and sobbed. If you can, forgive me. If not, I'll understand. But please know that I love you and always have. Richard, it was different. It wasn't like with you. Michael looked down at his wife on her knees. The scene was excruciating. He felt anger, disgust, pity, and his own overwhelming fatigue all at once. Get up, he said quietly, looking away. No need for this drama. Sarah sobbed and stood up, swaying. Michael turned away, trying to compose himself. One thought pounded in his head. What now? You say you love me, he said hoarsely, but you sleep with someone else for months. How is that compatible, Sarah? Love is a choice, every day, and you made your choice. Sarah remained silent, her head down. If I really didn't value you, Michael continued, I would have left long ago or found someone else on the side. But it never even occurred to me, because I made a vow and loved you no matter what. And you. He paused, feeling his temper rising again. "I understand," Sarah said softly. "I broke our trust, and I don't deserve forgiveness. But if there's even a tiny chance to fix it, I'm willing to do anything to regain your trust, Mike." Michael looked her straight in the face. "Regain your trust," he repeated quietly. "Sarah, it's impossible. It's shattered. I can never trust you again, do you understand?" A tear flickered on her eyelashes. I I could quit, we could move." "It's not about the job or the place," Michael interrupted wearily. "It's about what you did that lies between us now, and I can't forget it." Sarah covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing chokedly. Michael ran his hand over his face. A great weariness washed over him. Anger was gradually being replaced by devastation. What he wanted most now was to be alone, to digest everything. It was unbearable to be near her. "It's better for us to live separately," he said in a lifeless tone. "I don't know what will happen next, but for now, I can't see you around." Panic flashed in Sarah's eyes. "No, please, don't push me away. I have nowhere to go." "There are people," he said sharply, not even trying to hide his sarcasm. "To Richard, for example." Sarah shook her head. "I don't want to go to him. I don't." "Then go to your sister's or find a hotel. I don't care," Michael snapped. "But you better not stay under my roof tonight." Sarah closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. She spent a few agonizing seconds trying to gather her courage. Can I at least say goodbye to Jake?" she whispered. Michael thought about it. He looked at the stairs. There was silence at the top. "I don't think this is a good idea," he answered quietly. "He doesn't want to see you." Sarah sobbed louder, but remained silent, admitting she was right. She looked broken. Michael felt a momentary twinge of pity, but the memory of her lie overwhelmed it. He turned to go into the kitchen, unable to watch her suffer any longer. "Get the things you need and go," he called over his shoulder. "Then we'll decide how we're going to live. But today, go away." He heard a quiet groan behind him. However, he did not turn around. After taking a few steps, he leaned his hands on the kitchen table. His strength was leaving him. There were soft footsteps behind him as Sarah headed into the hallway. There was a pause and the click of a lock as she picked up her coat and bag. Michael stood there, his eyes closed, trying not to burst into tears again. "I'll call tomorrow to see how you are," Sarah's weak voice came from the door. Michael didn't answer, continuing to stand with his back turned. Another second, and the sound of the door opening was heard. Before leaving, Sarah seemed to remember something and said in a trembling voice, "Tell Jake that I love him very much." The door slammed. Michael was left in an empty house. His temples were throbbing, his ears were ringing. He walked into the living room and sank down onto the couch, feeling his legs buckle. The house, once so cozy and warm, now seemed alien. Michael looked around the room. The photographs on the walls, witnesses of their former happiness, now seemed to mock him. On one of the shelves stood a framed photo. He, Sarah, and little Jake hugging on Christmas morning by the tree. Everyone was so happy, so beaming. Michael suddenly sobbed like a child and dropped his head into his hands. That's how Jake found him. The sun quietly came down the stairs, pale and with red eyes from crying. He timidly approached the sofa. "Dad," Michael sat up straight, trying to stop his sobs. "Yes, son, I'm sorry it happened." Jake sat down silently next to his father and suddenly hugged him. Michael felt the boy's shoulders tremble. "Is it true?" Jake asked plaintively. "She's gone?" Michael swallowed the lump in his throat. "Yes, for a while, at least." Jake buried his face in his chest like he had when he was a child and began to sob. Michael stroked his back, his own tears escaping him. And so they sat, father and son, in the middle of the empty house, sharing their grief and trying to find comfort in each other. The morning was gray and gloomy, as if nature shared the mood of Michael's house. He woke early, although he had hardly slept. His head was splitting, His eyes were swollen from crying all night. Michael spent the night on the sofa in the living room because he did not have the strength to return to the empty marital bedroom. Jake was sleeping nearby, covered with a blanket at the other end of the couch. Apparently, at some point during the night, the boy had also come down, not wanting to be alone upstairs. Michael rose carefully, trying not to wake his son. He felt his whole body ache. Apparently, by morning, he had fallen into a heavy, restless sleep in an uncomfortable position. The house was silent. Only the clock ticked on the wall. The family's usual Saturday routine was broken forever. In the past, on such weekend mornings, Sarah would get up first, make pancakes or an omelet for everyone, and turn on music in the kitchen. Today, the kitchen was filled with nothing but silence. Michael tiptoed out into the hall and peered out the window. It was drizzling outside, and the street was deserted, with occasional cars passing. There was no sign of Sarah, as if she had been part of a nightmare hallucination from the previous night. But everything that was happening was reality, the hardest reality in his life. He felt hungry and remembered that neither he nor Jake had eaten a proper dinner the night before. Michael sighed and went into the kitchen. Everything inside him protested he didn't want to do anything. But his son would wake up soon, and he needed to be fed. No matter how much pain it was, no matter what storms were raging in his soul, he needed to take care of the child. Michael started the coffee maker and took the eggs out of the fridge. He automatically began to make an omelet, remembering how Sarah had once taught him this simple recipe. A lump rose in his throat, but he forced himself not to break down. As the omelet sizzled in the pan, he heard footsteps behind him. Jake was standing at the entrance to the kitchen, disheveled, sleepy, and so sad that Michael's heart sank. "Good morning, son," he said quietly. "Hi," Jake said hoarsely, rubbing his eyes. "What time is it?" "About 8, Michael replied, flipping the omelet. "Are you okay?" Jake shrugged and sat down on a stool. "I don't know. I guess nothing." He stared at the table, drumming his fingers on the wood. Michael spooned the omelet onto 2 plates and placed one in front of his son. "Eat something," he said softly. "You need your strength." Jake chuckled sourly. "You're making sure I don't starve to death, Mom." He suddenly fell silent, as if he had been burned by the word mother. Michael looked down. "Mom's not here now," he continued calmly, "but I'll take care of you. Don't worry about it." Jake nodded, picking at his plate with his fork. They ate in silence for a while. Finally, the son asked quietly, without raising his eyes, "Are you sure you'll get divorced now?" The direct question hung in the silence of the kitchen. Michael squeezed the handle of his coffee mug. Even for him, the answer was not yet clear, but he knew there was no turning back. "I don't see any other way out," he answered cautiously. "Probably, yes, we'll get divorced." Jake stood up abruptly, knocking over the stool. His face twisted in pain. "Damn it!" he shouted and kicked the chair leg. "How could she? She found a time when I was finishing school. Everything is going to hell now." Michael walked around the table and put his arm around his son's shoulders, trying to calm him down. Jake resisted at first, then turned and rested his forehead on his father's shoulder. "I'm sorry, son," Michael whispered. "I know how much it hurts you. I do too." "Why did she do that?" Jake muttered hoarsely. "Were we a bad family, or am I a bad son?" Michael pulled back, looking his son in the eyes. "No, absolutely not. You have absolutely nothing to do with this, do you hear me? What Mom did, it was her mistake, her choice. It's not your fault." Jake nodded, wiping away the tears with his sleeve. I don't want to see her yet, and I don't want to talk about her." "No one will force you," Michael answered seriously. They sat down at the table again. Michael knew there was a long road ahead. Jake would have to get used to living with one parent or the other, most likely. That was if the court decided on joint custody or something. The legal details were clearly in his mind for the first time. He would have to deal with a divorce. "Dad," Jake asked quietly after a pause, "and you've never cheated on your mom either." Michael raised his eyebrows in surprise. Of course not. It's just, you said that you worked a lot. Maybe you were also looking for someone on the side. The son muttered, lowering his gaze. Jake, Michael said softly, things happen between adults, but I've never thought about cheating, not once. Jake nodded, as if confirming something for himself, and finally began to eat the omelet little by little. Michael forced himself to swallow a couple of bites. Too, he couldn't taste it, but he knew he needed strength. Breakfast was almost over when there was a knock at the front door. They both jumped. Michael tensed. Could it be Sarah? Jake turned pale. I'll open it, Michael said quickly, gesturing for his son to stay put. In the hallway, he peered cautiously out the window. Tom was standing on the porch, shielding himself from the drizzling rain with an umbrella. Michael unlocked the door. Tom, the friend smiled sadly. Hello, buddy. I wanted to check in this morning. How are you? Can I come in? Michael nodded, feeling a sudden wave of gratitude that he wasn't alone in his misfortune. He stepped back, letting Tom in. Tom shook off his umbrella and looked at his friend. You look like you were run over by a truck, Tom said honestly. I feel pretty much the same, Michael chuckled wryly. Jake poked his head out of the kitchen. Oh, hello, Uncle Tom, he said quietly, trying to sound casual but giving away his sad expression. Hello, kid, Tom said softly. He was Jake's godfather and treated him almost like his own nephew. How are you holding up? Jake just shrugged, looking down. Michael put his hand on his son's shoulder. We just had breakfast. Maybe I should make some more coffee. I wouldn't refuse, Tom nodded. The three of them went into the kitchen. While Michael was pouring coffee for his friend, Tom tried to cheer Jake up by talking about school and baseball. The guy answered in monosyllables. It was obvious that he was having a hard time, but he was trying to hold on. Okay, I'm going to go to my room, Jake finally said, obviously sensing that the adults wanted to talk in private. Thanks, Dad. Breakfast was delicious. If anything happens, I'm nearby, Michael reminded him. Jake went upstairs. The sound of his bedroom door closing was heard. Tom looked at his friend carefully. Well, spill it. Michael sat down heavily in his chair. I saw everything, Tom, he said dully, just as you suspected. She's cheating on me. He gave his friend a brief account of the events of the previous evening, how he had watched, how he had found the motel, the fight, and how they had spent the entire night in agony. Tom listened, clenching his fists in anger from time to time. Damn, he said quietly when Michael finished. Well, I'll tell her someday. Poor Jake. I kicked her out, Michael said, staring into the mug in front of him. I don't know if it was right, but I couldn't help it. He did the right thing, Tom snapped. Let her feel the consequences. Where is she now? I don't know exactly. I think she was with her sister. I doubt she went to him after everything. Michael rubbed the bridge of his nose tiredly. She seemed to want to break up with him. I'm not sure. Tom chuckled, as if that makes any difference. There was silence. Then Tom asked cautiously, Have you decided what's next? About the divorce, I mean. More likely yes than no, Michael answered, raising his reddened eyes to his friend. I can't live with her the way I did before, Tom. I love her, loved her, but after this. I understand, nodded the friend. I can't imagine for the life of me how you can forgive something like that. There are people who try to start over after betrayal, Michael noted wearily, but that's definitely not me. Every second will be poisoned by mistrust. So you're going to get a divorce, Tom concluded. Well, then you need a good family lawyer. Michael tapped his fingers nervously on the table. I guess. I don't know anything about it. I have a friend, will help, don't worry, his friend assured him. The main thing is, don't drag it out. The sooner everything is formalized, the sooner you'll be able to move on with your life. Move on. It sounded abstract now. Michael just nodded. Tom finished his coffee and, after hesitating, asked, Look, what about? Well, I mean financially, The house, savings, all that stuff. You didn't have a prenuptial agreement, did you? No, Michael shook his head. Then be prepared that she might want half of it, Tom warned, his expression darkening. Even if she's guilty, the law isn't always on the side of the victim in this matter. Michael felt a new wave of anxiety at these words. He hadn't thought about property. The house had been bought together with joint funds. Savings, bills, everything was also shared. Divorce threatened financial stress. And one more thing, Tom continued. Jake, you'll probably want to keep your son with you, won't you? Of course, Michael answered without thinking. I won't let him separate me from him. And Jake himself. You saw his reaction. I doubt he'll want to live with his mother after this. But the court will decide, Tom noted, although at his age, they might ask his opinion. Michael felt panic rising inside him. What if, despite everything, Sarah fought for custody or demanded some of his time? He didn't want to even think about his son being forced to spend time at her lover's house, for example, if she got together with him. The thought made him sick. She wouldn't dare, Michael muttered, more to himself. We'll see, Tom gently patted his friend on the shoulder. The main thing now is to do everything correctly, according to the law. He dug into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a business card. Here, this is a lawyer I know, Howard Schiller. A great guy, he's an expert on divorces. Call him Monday morning, tell him it's from me, he'll see you. Michael took the card, though his eyes were unfocused as he stared past it. Thanks, Tom. I don't know what I'd do without you. Nonsense, my friend waved his hand. You would have done the same for me. They fell silent, then Tom asked, By the way, did she call or write today? No, Michael shook his head. He checked his phone. No messages, no missed calls. Honestly, I'm glad. I'm not ready to talk to her. Tom chuckled knowingly. I see. Well, if he suddenly appears, it's better to communicate in writing or in front of witnesses. Michael nodded, taking note. His honest and kind wife had suddenly become a stranger. Now Michael didn't know what to expect from her. They talked a little more about everyday things. Tom offered to help with the cooking or distract Jake, but Michael thanked him and declined. He didn't want anyone else at home yet. He felt that Jake would be more comfortable with his father right now. Finally, Tom stood up. I'll be in touch. Don't be shy. Call me anytime, day or night. Got it? Thanks, buddy. Michael hugged his friend goodbye. I appreciate it. With Tom gone, Michael felt a little more confident. At least he had a plan. Contact a lawyer on Monday, find out his rights, start the process. For now, just get through the weekend. He went upstairs and knocked softly on Jake's door. Jake responded in a muffled voice, yes. Michael opened the door slightly. His son was sitting at the computer, with a page of some forum open in front of him. I won't disturb you, Michael said. I wanted to ask, do you have plans for today? Jake shrugged. Not really. The guys invited me to the movies, but I don't want to. I understand, Michael paused. If you want, we can just stay home. Or we can play something, watch a movie. Jake nodded. Let's stay home. I don't want to go anywhere. Whatever you say. I'll be on the first floor, okay? If you need anything, call me, Michael said. He was about to leave when Jake called out to him quietly. Dad. Yes? What if she comes? The son asked quietly, not taking his eyes off the monitor. There was fear in his voice. Michael exhaled slowly. It's unlikely that she'll come today. But if she does, I'll talk to her. You won't have to. Jake nodded without turning around. Michael quietly closed the door. As he went downstairs, he silently promised himself that no matter what happened, he would protect his son from further shocks. Sarah asked him to tell him that she loved him, but that didn't make Jake feel any better now. Let time pass. They spent the rest of the day quietly. They watched a football match on TV, though without much enthusiasm. Jake dozed off on the couch in the afternoon, and Michael covered him with a blanket. The weather outside had gotten worse. Rain was pouring down, Gusts of wind were driving fallen leaves down the street. It was as if autumn itself was emphasizing the end of the warm season in their lives. That evening, after heating up a frozen lasagna that he and Sarah had once made together, Michael and Jake ate dinner almost without saying a word. Then Jake went back to his room, saying he wanted to watch YouTube and chat with friends online. Michael didn't mind teens sometimes feel better sharing online than with a parent, and if his son could talk it out there, maybe he'd feel better. Alone, Michael sat in the living room with his laptop. He opened a blank document and began jotting down a to-do list. Call a lawyer, gather financial documents, bank statements, marriage certificate, Jake's birth certificate. He needed to be prepared. The line, "Talk to Sarah about the future," was also in his head, but he didn't write it down. It was too hard to even formulate. Late in the evening, when the house was asleep, Michael went up to the bedroom. He stood for a long time on the threshold of the semi-dark room. Everything was in its place, only the dressing table was missing a multitude of bottles and cosmetics. Sarah had grabbed her most necessary things, or put them away. The absence of her favorite blanket on the chair caught my eye. She must have taken it. Michael collapsed onto the bed. The scent of her perfume still lingered on the pillows, the familiar scent that had once brought him comfort, now a sharp pain. He turned to face her empty side of the bed, running his hand over the cold sheet. That night he was to sleep alone for the first time, knowing that she would not return either late or early, would not return at all, perhaps never. The wave of grief that washed over him was so strong that Michael groaned. He buried his face in the pillow, soaking up her scent, and let himself cry until the tears ran out. And so he fell asleep, exhausted, in the arms of painful dreams, where happy memories of the past were mixed with an unclear, frightening image of the future, in which there was no longer a place for his wife. Sarah sat on the edge of the sofa in the living room of her older sister's apartment and stared blankly out the window. It was drizzling sadly outside. The world had seemed to have darkened and narrowed over the past 24 hours to the size of this cramped room and her own grief. After Michael kicked her out of the house, Sarah, barely holding back her tears, went to her sister's. Her older sister, Linda, lived alone, without family, and had always been close to Sarah. Hearing through her sobs on the phone what had happened, Linda invited her to come over without asking. Now Sarah felt like a burden, and at the same time, the only person she could cry to. Linda, having heard the story of what had happened the night before, had reacted ambiguously. At first she screamed in indignation, either at Sarah or just into the air. Then she calmed down and hugged her sobbing sister. Apparently, Linda found it hard to believe that her exemplary little sister had ended up in such a story. In the morning, Linda went to work, leaving Sarah with the keys and instructions to prepare for a serious conversation in the evening. Sarah imagined that she was in for a difficult conversation. Her sister was clearly going to say everything she thought, and she deserved it. Sarah turned her head and glanced at the cell phone lying next to her. She had been staring at the screen ever since she woke up, hoping for some kind of message from Michael or Jake. But the phone was silent. Sarah dialed Michael's number several times, and each time she hung up before finishing the call. She knew he wouldn't want to talk. He might even have blocked her number. Same story with Jake's phone. She wrote her son a long message, full of apologies and words of love, but she never got around to sending it. She was afraid he would read it and only get angrier. The thought brought tears down her cheeks again. God, what have I done? She silently prayed. What am I supposed to live for now? There was no answer. The apartment was silent, only the clock ticked steadily and the refrigerator hummed occasionally. Around midday, the silence was broken by the doorbell. Sarah perked up. Her heart skipped a beat. What if it was Michael? Maybe he had come to talk? She rushed to open the door. To her surprise, Richard stood there, soaking wet from the rain, holding a bouquet of poorly wrapped lilies. Sarah froze. Sarah, hello, he said, uncertainty. She was silent, looking at him with wide, reddened eyes. Finally, she stepped back, gesturing for him to enter. Richard handed her the flowers. Here, I brought some. Sarah took the bouquet automatically. The lilies smelled too strong, and she felt a little sick from the sweet aroma. She threw the flowers on the nightstand and turned to Richard. He was shifting awkwardly from one foot to the other. "I called you yesterday," he said, trying to look into her face. "But you didn't answer." "I wasn't up to calling," Sarah answered quietly, her voice hoarse from tears. Richard blushed. "I see. I was terribly worried about you." "What happened then? Your husband, he didn't touch you. I mean, are you okay?" Sarah smiled bitterly. "Physically, I'm fine, except that my life is ruined." Richard looked down. "I'm very sorry that everything turned out this way." "What a pity," Sarah blurted out unexpectedly and passionately. "Richard, my family broke up. My son doesn't talk to me. What the hell are you sorry about now?" She hadn't thought there was any anger left in her. It seemed like there was only guilt and grief. But the sight of Richard had awakened some anger. Maybe because he reminded her of what she had risked everything for, and now she knew it wasn't worth the candle. Richard raised his palms in a conciliatory tone. "I understand your emotions, but you know I didn't mean to hurt you. I really do love you." Sarah shook her head, looking at him incredulously. Love? What did he know about love? Michael involuntarily appeared before her mind's eye, his face twisted with pain when he had screamed yesterday in the parking lot. That was real love, wounded but real. And what she had sought with Richard. What was it? Delusion, passion, selfishness. "You don't understand," she said tiredly, falling back onto the couch. "There's nothing we can do to fix this. Michael will never forgive me. And Jake, he doesn't want to see me." Her voice broke at the sound of her son's name. She covered her face with her hands, holding back her sobs. Richard sat down next to her and awkwardly put his arm around her shoulders. "Listen, it may look terrible now, but in time, they'll come to terms with it. Jake is your son, he loves you, he's a teenager, he'll burn out." Sarah pulled away from his arms and looked at him almost with disgust. "Resign themselves? Do you hear yourself, Richard? Burn out?" She stood up and paced nervously around the room. "I broke my son's heart. He may never forgive me, and he shouldn't forgive me. And Michael." She didn't finish speaking, but shook her head as if trying to clear the images from her mind. Richard stood up after her, trying to calm her down. Okay, I'm sorry. That's not what I meant. It's just, maybe we should go away somewhere for a while. Together? You shouldn't be alone right now. And it'll be hard at work, everyone's probably already gossiping." Sarah stared at him. He was saying, leave together. Did he seriously think she was ready to run away with him now, leaving everything behind, like in a melodrama? Her heart sank with resentment. How much arrogance. "Richard," she said quietly, but there was tension in her tone, "do you have any idea what I'm going through right now? I've lost my family. Completely. Period." He tried to object. "But you said that you love me." Sarah closed her eyes. Yes, she had said those words to him. In the heat of passion, in moments when it seemed he had become the center of her new world. But what were those feelings compared to what she had destroyed? An illusion. Richard came closer, tried to take her hands. "Sarah, let's start a new life together. Since everything is like this, well, we plan to be together someday." "Planned?" Sarah pulled her hands away. "I don't think you understand. We didn't really plan anything. We had a romance, a secret, beautiful, carefree one, and now it's over. There are real consequences." Richard frowned. "So, you regret everything that happened between us?" "And you?" she retorted. "Look at the situation. Is it easier for you? Are you ready to accept me with all these problems? With my son who hates you, with my possible divorce, scandal?" Richard opened his mouth, but Sarah didn't let him answer, continuing. "Yesterday, when Michael attacked you, you were scared, I saw it. And this is only the beginning. It will get worse. Court, division of property, maybe dirt on us. Are you ready to dive into this?" Richard's face showed confusion. He clearly hadn't expected such a speech. I don't know," he finally managed to say, "I want to be with you, but it's really all very complicated." Sarah nodded, feeling the bitter rightness of the moment. "You see, you didn't sign up for this, and neither did I." She sank down onto the sofa, rubbing her temples. Her head was splitting. "I may be saying terrible things now, but I think we should stop this." Richard froze, then his voice grew stronger. "Are you leaving me?" "What else can we do?" Sarah sighed. "I don't have the strength to go on. My life has fallen apart." She covered her face with her hands. Richard stood next to her silently. Perhaps a minute passed. "I understand," he finally said quietly, although his voice was hurt. "It turns out you don't need me anymore. As soon as everything was revealed, you immediately went back to him, right? Even though he kicked you out himself." Sarah dropped her hands and flared up angrily. "Don't you dare say that. I'm not going back to him. He's my husband, damn it, the father of my son. And yes, I lost them because of my selfishness. And you." She stood up, gathering her last strength. "What you? You were my passion, my escape from reality. And look where this escape led. I am ashamed to death, Richard. Ashamed of myself." Richard turned pale at these words. There was a painful silence. Finally, he nodded, looking at the floor. "I see. Well, I guess I'll go." He turned toward the door. He had already grabbed the handle when he stopped. "I hope you'll be happy, Sarah. I really do, and I'm sorry if I could." With these words, he left, quietly closing the door behind him. Sarah sank down exhausted on the floor next to the sofa. A bouquet of lilies lying on the nightstand caught her eye. She suddenly felt a sharp hatred for these flowers. How dare they smell so brightly in the midst of her grief? Sarah jumped up, grabbed the bouquet, and threw it at the wall. The white lilies scattered, petals mixed with water fell to the floor. She burst into tears again and slid down onto the carpet among the fallen petals. Now she was all alone. No family, no lover, no home, only guilt and the endless pain of loss. When Linda returned a few hours later, she found her sister still there, sitting on the floor by the sofa with an empty look in her eyes. "Sarah," she called softly, stepping over the scattered flowers. "What happened here?" Sarah slowly looked up at her sister. "Richard came." Linda grimaced. "So what?" "I sent him away," Sarah replied in a colorless voice. "It's over between us." Linda sighed with relief and sat down next to her, putting her arm around her sister's shoulders. "This is for the best." They sat in silence for a few minutes. Finally, Linda asked, "What are you going to do now?" Sarah shook her head. "I don't know. Michael doesn't want to see me, Jake especially." "Are you thinking of trying to make peace with him? With Michael?" The sister asked cautiously. "Is that possible?" Sarah whispered, closing her eyes. "He said he could never forgive, and I understand him." Linda frowned. "But you still love him, right?" Sarah sobbed. "More than life. Only I realized it too late." The sister shook her head sadly, patting Sarah on the back. "Poor thing. Well, I'll tell you this. If he files for divorce, you'll have to accept it. But don't give up on Jake. He's a child, he was angry, but sooner or later he'll want to see you. You're a good mother, despite this mistake." Sarah couldn't help but smile bitterly. A good mother doesn't destroy a family and doesn't make her son suffer. "People make mistakes," Linda sighed. "It's unforgivable, I know. But think about it. You still have your whole life ahead of you. Jake will grow up. Maybe he'll forgive you in time. You need to at least be strong for him." Sarah nodded through her tears. It was hard to think about the future. Every part of the life she knew had crumbled in one day. Linda continued cautiously, "You'll need to meet with Michael, discuss the formalities. When you've both cooled down a bit." "He's probably already looking for a lawyer," Sarah said with pain, "and he's right to do so." "Try to behave decently," advised the sister. "Don't make things worse for him if you're guilty. Think of Jake. If you don't drag it out, it will be easier for him." Sarah nodded again. She knew Linda was right. The only thing she could do for Michael and Jake now was to let them build a new life without her, and not make things worse with scandals. But still, fight for your place in your son's life, Linda added. Maybe not now, but later, when time passes. He is still your child, after all. I'll try, Sarah whispered, if he doesn't push me away completely. Linda hugged her sister tighter. Anything is possible. Prepare for the worst and the best. The main thing now is to hold on. At least I need you, she tried to smile. And Jake needs you too. He just won't admit it yet. For the first time in a long time, Sarah leaned on her sister's shoulder, feeling a grain of support. She had lost almost everything that was dear to her, but while she was alive, she had to fight for the meaning of living on, at least for her son. Somewhere deep inside her, there was a tiny hope. Maybe one day, Jake would understand how much she loved him and forgive her, at least partially. As for Michael, Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, fighting back tears. He would hardly ever want to see her, and she had no right to ask for anything. However, she had made up her mind that if it took her the rest of her life, she would make amends to them. Even if she never received forgiveness, she must at least try to regain her son's trust and make amends with her actions, as much as possible. On Monday morning, Michael woke up with a sense of purpose that was unusual for the last few days. Today, he would take the first official step toward ending his marriage, meeting with a lawyer to find out how to protect himself and his son. He agreed with his colleagues to take a couple of days off, citing family circumstances. No one asked unnecessary questions apparently. Everyone understood from his voice that something serious had happened. Jake also stayed home. Michael suggested that he skip school for a couple of days, file a sickness notice. He usually didn't encourage truancy, but now his son was completely unprepared to interact with his classmates. Jake agreed without resistance and even asked himself, "Can I stay home for now?" Michael just nodded, "Sure." At 10:30, Michael was already parking outside the office of Howard Schiller, the lawyer Tom had recommended. The small firm occupied the first floor of an office building. Michael's heart was pounding. He had never dealt with a lawyer before, and the prospect of divorce still seemed unrealistic. But he steeled himself and walked inside. Howard Schiller was a short, balding man in his 50s with piercing gray eyes. He met Michael in the reception area and shook his hand firmly. "Nice to meet you, Michael. Although it's a shame it's on such an occasion. Tom jotted me down a few words over the phone, but I'd like to hear it all from you." They walked into a cozy office. Diplomas and certificates hung on the walls, and thick legal reference books stood on the shelves. Howard sat at the desk, gesturing for Michael to sit in the chair opposite. "So, tell us what happened to you," the lawyer began. Michael swallowed and began by noticing the change in his wife's behavior, then described the events of Friday, the surveillance, the capture at the motel, the scandal. He tried to speak as calmly as possible, although his voice shook at times. Howard did not interrupt, merely nodding occasionally. "I understand," he said when Michael had finished. "It's a difficult situation, I sympathize. But let's move on to the legal side. You intend to file for divorce, correct?" "Yes," Michael nodded firmly. "I don't see any other way out." "Okay, our state allows for both consent and fault-based divorce," Howard began to explain. "Adultery is the official basis for fault-based divorce, and having evidence of adultery can affect a number of things, including your wife's right to alimony." Michael listened attentively. The lawyer continued. "First about the children. You have one minor child, 16 years old, right?" "Yes, Jake is 16. He will be 18 next year." "I see. At this age, the court usually takes into account the teenager's opinion on who he wants to live with. Do you want your son to stay with you?" "Of course," Michael answered without hesitation. "Jake himself won't want to stay with his mother. He's now very angry and offended with her. This is to be expected. However, I recommend approaching the issue carefully. If the case goes to court, your wife formally has the same rights to custody. However, given the boy's age and the fact of her misconduct, it is likely that an agreement can be reached. What if we don't come to an agreement? Michael asked anxiously. If there is a dispute, the court will decide based on the best interests of the child, the lawyer explained. More often, it is joint legal custody, but the main residence is with one of the parents. I think you have a good chance of being the primary guardian if Jake himself wants it. And as you say, he does. Michael exhaled a little. Yes, he made it clear that he wanted to stay with me. Howard nodded. In that case, we'd probably suggest that your wife set up a voluntary arrangement where the child stays with you, and she has visitation rights by arrangement or on certain days. Is that acceptable to you? Michael thought. He wanted to completely shield his son from communicating with his mother, seeing how much pain it was causing him. But on the other hand, he understood that it was wrong to completely sever their connection. Jake needed his mother too, maybe not now, but when the emotions subsided, he answered, I don't mind them seeing each other if he wants to. I won't force it. I see, the lawyer made a note. Now, financial issues. Do you have jointly acquired property, a house, cars, bills, savings? Michael laid out the files he'd grabbed. Mortgage statements, bank statements, an inventory of assets. Howard flipped through the papers quickly. So, the house was purchased during the marriage, registered in the names of both of them. He clarified, Yes, we took out a mortgage together 10 years ago and paid it off 3 years ago, Michael confirmed. Good. Look, in a divorce, according to our legislation, equal division of jointly acquired property is assumed unless otherwise agreed. However, if there is marital guilt, the court may deviate from the principle of equality in favor of the innocent spouse, especially if the so-called embezzlement of common funds on the side is proven. You mean if she spent the money on her lover? Michael asked, wincing. Yes, if, for example, she paid for hotels from the family budget, gave gifts from common funds, Howard explained. You can try to collect such amounts or compensate for them during division. Michael recalled. He had seen a receipt for an expensive dinner in her purse once a couple of weeks ago. He hadn't paid attention to it then. There must have been other expenses. I think that could have happened, he said quietly. I'll try to get the credit card statements and see what happens. Great, that will come in handy, the lawyer nodded. Now about alimony for a spouse. In our state, there is a rule. A spouse caught cheating loses the right to receive alimony from the other spouse. Michael breathed a sigh of relief. So I won't have to pay her anything every month. Probably not, Howard confirmed. Unless, of course, you are found innocent in court and she is found guilty. In such cases, spousal support is not awarded, even if the incomes are different. By the way, do your incomes differ greatly? Michael shrugged. I make a little more, but not much. We're both middle class. I see. Well, and child support, the lawyer added, since the child will most likely stay with you, she may have to pay child support for his maintenance. But given Jake's age, he'll have to pay them in about a year and a half or two until he reaches adulthood, so it's not significant. Michael smiled sourly. I'm not trying to take money from her, unless it's to cover the expenses of my son, and even then. We can discuss this later, Howard nodded. Perhaps, as an agreement, you will decide that there will be no mutual payments, neither you to her nor she to you. Many do this if both are financially independent. Yes, I would prefer it that way, Michael agreed. Howard folded the papers. Okay, here's the plan. We're filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery. Here's the evidence. Do you have anything on hand? Photos, correspondence. There are pictures I took. Michael remembered the camera. He pulled out his phone and showed the lawyer several pictures he had managed to transfer from the camera to the phone. The photo clearly showed Sarah kissing Richard outside the motel. Michael looked away from the screen, clenching his jaw. The lawyer looked at the pictures with a professional eye. Well, that's very convincing. Your wife's face is visible, the location is clear. That's serious evidence. Plus, we can attach your written testimony about what happened. Maybe your friend, who knew you were going there, will confirm it too. but that's not important. Michael nodded. Usually, Howard continued, such cases end in amicable settlement, especially if the party who committed adultery does not want publicity. Do you think your wife will agree to a peaceful settlement? Michael thought about it. Sarah looked so broken and guilty. He doubted she would put up a fight. I think so, he replied. She's unlikely to want to drag it out or argue. That's good, the lawyer noted. Then perhaps we'll be able to get a divorce fairly quickly and quietly. If she agrees to your main conditions, that the child is with you, the property is divided by agreement without you paying her alimony. I hope she agrees, Michael sighed. I'd like to resolve everything without going to court, at least for my son's sake. That's commendable, Howard nodded. I'll prepare the papers and send your wife's side notice. She'll have a chance to respond and hire her own lawyer. But if she's sensible, she'll probably just sign the papers. Michael felt both relieved and bitter. Everything was moving toward the official end of his marriage. These formal conversations made it clear that there was no turning back. That's all for today, the lawyer concluded. I'll let you know what happens next. If your wife responds quickly, we might be able to resolve the issue in a matter of months. Michael thanked Howard, and they shook hands. He left the office feeling drained but focused. At least now he knew what to do: get a divorce, provide stability for his son. On the way home, he stopped at his bank and ordered a statement of the joint account and credit cards for the last few months for business. Looking through the printouts right in the car, Michael was bitterly convinced. Yes, Sarah had been spending money on the side. Here were several large cash withdrawals on days when she had probably been dating him. Here was a hotel bill for $200 he had never stayed at that hotel, and purchases at an expensive jewelry boutique, although she had not given him any gifts during that period. Apparently, she had given them to someone else. The financial evidence no longer caused a sharp pain, rather a cold disappointment. There were so many lies around, he thought, putting the papers away, but now those lies were dispelled. When Michael returned home, he found Jake at the kitchen table with a math textbook. His son was trying to figure out the assignments, making up for the lesson he had missed. How did it go? He asked as soon as his father entered. Fine, Michael replied, pouring himself some water. I met with a lawyer, started the divorce process. Jake nodded seriously. I see. He hesitated, then asked, Is this for long? I don't know exactly, Michael admitted. If Mom doesn't argue, then maybe a few months and that's it. If she does, then longer. Can she argue? Jake frowned. Theoretically, yes, Michael sighed. But I don't think she will. She understands her guilt. Jake slammed his fist down on his open textbook. She'd be better off leaving us alone. Michael sat down next to him. Son, I will try to make everything convenient for us. Most likely, you will stay with me, and you will see your mother from time to time, if you want. I don't want to, Jake muttered. Michael patted him on the shoulder. Now you won't want to. I don't know what will happen later, but I promise no one will force you to do what you don't want. Jake relaxed a little and said more quietly, Thanks, Dad. We're a team, Michael said softly, and we always will be. The son smiled weakly. He closed his textbook. Listen, Dad, can I start going to school tomorrow? Today I can't concentrate on anything anyway, but tomorrow I'll somehow start little by little. Michael looked at his son appraisingly. If you feel like you'd be better off staying home, no problem, stay. I'll cover for you. Jake nodded gratefully. They spent the rest of the day quietly. Jake did a little homework, listened to music, and surfed the internet. Michael sorted out the household chores he had neglected, washed clothes, washed dishes, cleaned up a bit. Previously, Sarah did most of the household chores. Now they were on him. But it was only a distraction, and he was even glad of the routine. Later in the evening, as the darkness deepened outside the windows, Jake emerged from his room and found his father sorting through a basket of dirty laundry. Maybe I should help. His son offered hesitantly, watching Michael try to figure out which of his clothes was colored and which was white. Michael smiled. That would be great. Otherwise, I might wash something wrong and your shirts will turn pink. Jake snorted softly, almost laughing, for the first time in days. He walked over and began to deftly separate the dark from the light. Thank you, Michael said sincerely. The two of them started the washing machine together and then sat down in the living room to watch a sitcom while the cycle finished. Neither of them might have been paying much attention, but the feeling of a normal evening together was a little comforting. Before going to bed, Michael checked his phone. There was one unread text message from Sarah. His heart sank, and he opened the message. Briefly, I know you hate me. I just wanted to know how Jake is. Please tell me if he's okay. That's all I ask for. Michael stared at these lines for a long time. He didn't know whether to answer or not. On the one hand, any connection with her hurt him. On the other hand, she was, after all, Jake's mother and was clearly tormented by ignorance. Finally, he typed back, Jake will be fine. He's home and hasn't been to school yet. He doesn't want to talk to you yet. Give him time. His finger hovered over the send button. He wasn't going to forgive her, but he didn't want to be as cruel as she was. He clicked send. A couple of minutes later, the phone beeped again. Thanks for answering. I won't bother you. Tell him I love him. Michael exhaled and deleted the correspondence. He did not fulfill this request to convey words of love. At least not now. Perhaps someday later. He turned off his phone and went to bed. The coming weeks promised to be difficult, but today, for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. He and his son would cope, no matter what. 3 months after that fateful day in the motel, Michael and Sarah were sitting at the same table again, this time in a formal office with their lawyers present. They were signing their divorce agreement. Everything went surprisingly smoothly. Sarah hired a lawyer, but did not dispute any of Michael's demands. Moreover, she herself offered to leave the house to Michael and Jake, although legally she could have claimed half the value. Sarah took only her car, personal savings in a separate account, and a few things. They divided the joint bank accounts equally, but there was not much money there. Michael didn't believe in such compliance at first. He expected at least some kind of bargaining, but Sarah seemed happy to give more, just to atone for her guilt. Her lawyer tried to intercede several times, for example. He offered to get her a part of the cost of the house or minimal child support, but Sarah refused. In the end, the wife's lawyer just threw up his hands and resigned himself to his client's decision. The custody issue over Jake was also resolved peacefully. Michael's house was determined to be the son's primary residence, and Sarah retained the right to see him by agreement. Sarah only asked to specify that she could visit her son once a week if he wanted. Michael agreed on paper, it was, but in practice, they understood that everything depended on Jake's own wishes. And so, all the papers were ready. A final formal hearing before a judge was coming, but it promised to be quick, since the parties had come to an agreement. The signatures were in. The marriage was effectively over. The lawyers shook hands. Sarah's lawyer, having collected the documents, asked her to go. But Sarah asked him to wait in the hallway. She wanted to talk to Michael alone for the last time. Howard, Michael's lawyer, bowed understandingly. I'll be outside, Michael. Call me when you're done. There were only 2 ex-spouses left in the room. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Michael looked at his hands, not knowing what to say. Sarah was the first to break the silence. Thank you for being honest and for not trying to finish me off. Michael grinned at the corner of his mouth. The point, you already understood everything. Sarah looked pale and very tired. She had lost noticeably weight over the months. Although she was dressed neatly a formal suit for the court, her face betrayed sleepless nights. How's Jake? She asked quietly, fiddling with the file on her lap. It's fine, Michael answered dryly. He's getting used to it. He still doesn't want to see me, her voice wavered. Michael nodded. He doesn't want to yet. Does he write to you sometimes? You write to him, don't you? Sarah looked down. Yes, I write once every few days. Mostly that I love him, and that I will wait until he wants to talk. He rarely answers. A couple of times he wrote that everything is okay with him and asked not to press. Michael said quietly, I think there's still time. Don't give up trying. Sarah looked at him gratefully. I won't give up. I'll write even if he doesn't answer. And of course, I think about him every day. There was silence. You, she began, then hesitated. Are you okay? It was strange to hear a caring question from someone who had hurt him so much. Michael shrugged. I'm coping. It helps that I have a lot to do both at work and at home. And Jake is nearby. He also holds me up. So yes, I haven't broken down, if that's what you mean. Sarah nodded. You're a good boy. You've always been strong. Michael remained silent. Then he asked quietly, Are you working? Have you returned to the same company? Yes, she replied. I took sick leave for a couple of weeks, then came back. I had to transfer to another department so as not to cross paths with him. The lover's name was not mentioned, but both understood. Michael had difficulty suppressing the unpleasant lump in his throat at the topic. I don't see him anymore, Sarah added quickly. We haven't had any contact since that day. He was transferred to another city. Michael nodded briefly, not really wanting to discuss it. How is your sister? He asked to change the subject. Linda is very supportive, Sarah sighed. I'm living with her for now, saving up for our own place. Well, she's always been straightforward. At first she scolded me, of course, then. Now we seem to communicate calmly. Michael remembered. Linda came to some holidays. She was a strict but kind woman. It's good that Sarah has at least such a rear. Michael, Sarah said suddenly, sitting up straight, I know there's no point in asking for forgiveness for the millionth time, but I want you to know I'm truly sorry. She swallowed, choosing her words. I ruined our happiness with my stupidity, and I lost the most precious thing, you. You were the best husband you could be, and I. The voice wavered. Michael raised his palm. Enough. Let's not do this again. We've already cleared everything up. Sarah nodded, wiping away a tear that quickly appeared. Yes, I just wanted you to know that I don't hold on to any illusions anymore. And I'll take any punishment. The punishment is already there, Michael answered quietly. We both know that. She lowered her head. He continued, I think it's better for us to only communicate about Jake from now on. It will be easier for everyone. Of course, Sarah agreed immediately. I'm not going to interfere in your life. She looked at his hands in the absence of a wedding ring on his finger and smiled sadly. She stopped wearing her ring, too. Do you still hate me? She suddenly asked, looking timidly into his eyes. Michael met that gaze. There was so much pain and hope in it at the same time that he couldn't help but feel a hint of pity, hatred. What did he feel now? There was no longer that all-consuming anger. There was only emptiness and regret. No, I don't hate you, he answered after a pause. To be honest, I try not to feel anything for you at all. It's easier that way. Sarah looked away, holding back tears. But I'm grateful you didn't start a war in the courtroom, Michael added. That's right. I couldn't help it, she said quietly. I've already taken so much from you. Let the house with Jake at least remain unchanged. Michael just sighed. Words of gratitude for the house did not come to him. He would have preferred not to be in this situation at all than to win the house. Finally, he stood up. I guess that's all. Sarah also stood up, clutching the folder with documents to her chest. Yes. They headed towards the exit. Sarah stopped at the door. Can I ask you one last thing? Michael waited patiently. Sarah looked into his face as if trying to memorize his eyes. Will you ever be able to forgive me? Well, at least, just as a person. Michael was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, I don't know, Sarah. Not now. She smiled sadly. I understand. Maybe I'll never be able to forgive myself. There was an awkward silence. Then the door opened slightly and Howard looked in, obviously worried that everything was okay. Michael waved that everything was okay. Sarah took the hint and stepped out the door. As she followed her lawyer down the hall, she turned to Michael for a second. "Goodbye, Mike." He nodded, watching without a smile as his ex-wife's figure walked away. "Goodbye, Sarah," he said quietly after her and closed the door to the conference room. The divorce was almost finalized. All that was left was the judge's stamp. But for both of them, the end had already been set. It's been 6 months since the divorce was officially finalized. During this time, Michael and Jake's lives have entered a new direction, unusual at first, but gradually they have adapted. The house seemed quieter without Sarah, but the atmosphere in it seemed calmer too. There were no more secret tensions, no more omissions. Father and son honestly shared their thoughts and feelings with each other, especially in the first months when both needed support. Michael didn't seek therapy, even though Tom insisted. Instead, he found solace in his work and caring for his son. The project at the company was a success, largely due to Michael throwing himself into the work. His bosses appreciated his contribution, and soon after the divorce, Michael was promoted to team leader. He received more responsibility and a little more money just in time, considering that he was now the only one providing for the household. Jake, too, to Michael's delight, gradually came to his senses. At first, his performance at school dropped a little. Teachers reported that he was thoughtful and absent-minded. But Michael paid a lot of attention to his son. He helped with homework in the evenings, went to meetings with teachers, and together they discussed the topic for a scientific project in physics. Gradually, Jake made up for lost time. Moreover, he became interested in baseball again. In the spring, he returned to the school team, began going to training. One sunny April day, Michael sat in the stands at his high school stadium, watching Jake play pitch with passion. Tom was nearby, cheering loudly for his godson. Their school team won, and Jake made a serious contribution. After the game, he ran up to his father, still holding the bat. "Did you see that, Dad? 3 strikeouts in a row," he blurted out excitedly, his eyes shining with a happy fire. Michael smiled widely, sincerely, as he hadn't smiled in a long time. "Well done. I'm proud of you, son." He ruffled Jake's hair under his cap. The boy laughed. Tom patted him on the shoulder. "Hey, champ, keep it up. How about some ice cream for that?" "Oh, right," Jake agreed. That day, the 3 of them walked away from the winning game, eating ice cream and chatting. Michael found himself thinking that he felt almost happy at that moment. The pain of betrayal had not disappeared completely, but it had finally receded into the background, no longer overshadowing everything else. There were other aspects of life: joy for his son's success, the support of friends, the pleasure of simple things. As for Sarah, she kept her word and did not interfere in their lives without permission. She wrote to Jake from time to time. At first, he demonstratively deleted the messages without reading them, but after a couple of months, curiosity got the better of him, and he finally read one of the letters. Michael did not know the details, but he saw that his son had a difficult evening after reading that text message. Jake was silent a lot, looked depressed. However, the next day he asked his father himself, "And what about Mom? Do you think she's okay?" The question caught Michael off guard. He answered cautiously, "I think it's not easy for her, but she's coping. She has your Aunt Linda, who helps her." Jake didn't answer then, just nodded and went to his room. But since then, the topic of his mother was no longer completely taboo. Sometimes Jake would briefly mention her or ask if she had called. On his 17th birthday that summer, Jake allowed his mother to congratulate him in person for the first time. Michael organized a small get-together in the park with friends, to which he invited Sarah and her sister. The meeting was reserved and awkward, but peaceful. Jake quietly accepted his mother's gift. Later, he confessed to his father that he was glad she came and did not mind seeing her occasionally for a short time. By this time, Michael himself had also taken several steps towards a new life. Thanks to Tom's efforts, he was dragged out a couple of times in public. First, His colleagues at work dragged him to a bar to celebrate a successful project. Michael was afraid that he would feel out of place, but to his surprise, he spent the evening well. They hung out with the guys, recalled old funny stories, and even to the humorous questions, "So how is your bachelor life going?" Michael responded without bitterness. He joked, saying, "I'm learning to cook and iron." At Tom's insistence, Michael went on a picnic, where he met a nice divorced woman named Marcia. They exchanged phone numbers and occasionally corresponded, although Michael was in no rush. The summer days flew by. One Sunday evening in July, Michael sat on the porch of the house with a cup of tea. In the yard, Jake and a friend were playing basketball, laughing and shouting at each other. As he passed his father, Jake waved his hand. "Dad, did you see? I almost made a three-pointer. Cool, practice your throw some more, and you'll score not just almost, but definitely," Michael replied with a smile. He leaned back in his lawn chair. The warm evening was spreading out onto the street, and cicadas were chirping somewhere in the bushes. Michael thought that life was starting to get better, all in all. Not the way he had once imagined, but still. Watching his son with shining eyes chase the ball under the hoop, Michael felt a quiet pride. Jake was growing up to be a worthy young man, despite everything. And he, Michael, had done everything to soften the blow of fate for his boy. Deep down, of course, there was sadness. Sometimes at night, Michael dreamed of the good old days, young Sarah, little Jake with a toothless smile. He woke up in tears. But these dreams came less and less often. The past was the past. New days, new impressions awaited him. "I still have a lot ahead of me," he thought then, looking at the sunset sky. And for the first time, he truly believed these words. A year later, the day arrived that Michael had dreamed of with pride and a little sadness. The day Jake graduated from high school. The summer sun shone on the schoolyard, filled with graduates in traditional gowns and square caps. Michael sat on a folding chair among other parents, trying not to miss the moment when his son's name was called. Sarah was somewhere behind, too, having come separately so as not to embarrass Jake. Michael caught her eye briefly before the ceremony began and nodded. They had barely communicated over the past year, except for the occasional text message about organizational matters concerning their son. But today was a special day, and their personal stories took a back seat. Finally, the alphabetical call came. Jake Fairbanks, his paternal last name. Michael stood up, clapping his hands as hard as he could. On stage, Jake, smiling, shook the director's hand and received the coveted diploma. He looked so grown up and confident. Michael's eyes, stung tears of pride blurred the picture, but he was not embarrassed by them. The ceremony ended and the graduates scattered to their hugging families. Jake found his father almost immediately. "Well, congratulations, graduate," Michael laughed, hugging his son tightly. "Thanks, Dad," Jake whispered, hugging him tightly too. "We did it." Michael chuckled. "Your merit, I only helped a little." At that moment, Sarah appeared a little further away. She stopped hesitantly a few steps away, holding a bouquet in her hands. Jake noticed his mother and, to Michael's surprise, beckoned to her with his hand. "Come to us, Mom." Sarah came over, trying to hold back her tears. She handed her son the bouquet. "Congratulations, Jake. I'm so proud of you." "Thank you," Jake said quietly. He took the flowers and suddenly leaned over, hugging his mother with one arm. Sarah began to sob, hugging her son back. Michael stepped back, giving them a minute. After a moment, Jake let go of his mother. Sarah's eyes were shining with tears, but her smile was happy. "Mom, we're going out with some friends to celebrate later, and you can come if you want," Jake said, wiping his nose with the sleeve of his robe. Sarah nodded rapidly. "Of course, darling, I'll come." Jake turned to his father. "Dad, you too?" Michael smiled. "Of course, I promised to take you to the pizzeria, so I'm the main driver." "Great," Jake beamed. "Then we'll meet at Gino's in an hour." His friends called out to him, and he apologized and ran back to his group of graduates to take a group photo. Michael and Sarah were left alone among the noisy crowd of parents. They were silent, watching their joyful son in the distance. Sarah was the first to speak. "Thank you for everything. You raised him wonderfully, Mike." Michael shook his head. "We both did our best. He's a great guy in his own right." Sarah looked at him timidly. "I'm so grateful that you let me be here today. It means a lot to me." "It's all Jake's doing," Michael answered calmly. "He decided it himself." Sarah smiled sadly. "Thank you, though." Michael shrugged. Inside, he felt neither hurt nor anger, only a slight sadness for what had been lost, and at the same time relief that they had been able to get through this day peacefully. "How are you?" he asked, keeping up a polite conversation. "It's fine," she nodded. I save up. By the way, I recently bought myself a small apartment. A small studio, but mine." "I'm glad to hear it," Michael replied sincerely. They watched as Jake, in the distance, and his friends threw his cap into the air. Sarah said quietly, "I wish you happiness. You deserve it." Michael felt a strange lump in his throat. He looked at the woman who had once been the love of his life, and was now just an acquaintance with a shared pain of the past. He did not know what to say to such sincere words. Finally, he simply said, "Thank you, and the same to you, Sarah." She smiled weakly and nodded. They looked at each other for a few seconds. So much unsaid, probably, still remained, but there was no point in talking anymore. It was all over. "Let's go," Michael pointed at the cars, trying to break the silence. "Yeah," she sighed. A minute later, their cars were leaving the parking lot one after another, heading to the place where their son and a new life were waiting for them, each one their own, but forever connected by common blood and memories. Michael drove behind Sarah and thought about how unpredictable fate was. Just a couple of years ago, he couldn't imagine that he could drive so calmly behind his ex-wife, without anger and pain, only with a quiet hope for the future. He had new goals ahead, helping Jake get into college in the fall, continuing to grow at work, and maybe giving a new relationship a chance. Life went on. He glanced up at the sky, where the midday sun was shining brightly. Everything will be fine, Michael thought, and he trusted that thought. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.